Hi, this is Caine O'Brien, the tapping consultant. Thanks for stopping by tappingbreakthrough.com. Today we're going to be talking about the emotional coefficient, a very powerful but seldom addressed issue that affects business performance, both for the better and for the worse. We all want business success, and we have pretty much equated know-how with success. If we have the right knowledge, the right background, the right training, we understand the procedures, we'll be successful. And since we want success, this is what we tend to focus on in business. But if that were the whole picture, then many businesses would be much more successful than they are. We can show that it's not the whole picture by posing one simple question. Why is it that many employees, from line worker to CEO, are very knowledgeable about their jobs, but still struggle to perform well? The answer is that this equation's not complete. The key thing that's missing, as you might have guessed, is the emotional coefficient. Now, this really isn't that surprising when you think about all the studies that have shown that people with high emotional quotients, high EQs, tend to get ahead in business. And while we accept that, we don't really know what it is that makes one person have a higher EQ than someone else. Well, one of the most important things is what we'll be talking about today. It's the negative emotions, the blocks that hold us back. And if we could just find a way to clear them, and you might have guessed that we can, then we would be able to perform our roles much more effectively. This emotional coefficient influences just about everything, from the global overall outlook on life all the way down to our feelings about specific tasks. It affects all of our relationships, including how we feel about the company we work for, our manager, and our coworkers. The emotional coefficient consists of positive emotions, joy, love, hope, gratitude, and so forth, and some that you could probably think of. And it also comprises negative emotions, fear, anger, sadness, distrust, contempt, disgust, anxiety, and more. And so our feelings about any particular topic tend to be a combination of these, some positive, some negative. And when you realize that on any given day and in any given situation, we could be experiencing feelings about any of the things in the left column, and those feelings could be any combination of the positive and the negative emotions, you end up with a very complex network of feelings and beliefs. Well, of course, we can't intellectualize that and try to map it all out. That would be impossible. It's just too complex. But we can actually address how this affects us in real life. So, for example, if an employee is contemplating performing a particular task, she might discover that she has feelings of hope that it goes well, but some fear about whether it's going to go well or not, and maybe even some distrust of the manager that assigned the task. So that's just one tiny thread about one tiny thing. Move her on to the next task, and she could have a completely different set of emotions about that. Never mind all the other items in the left column. So it's impossible to map all this out. So then how do we address it? Well, we address it situationally. We address it by how an employee feels about a particular task or a particular situation. We address it situationally. So let's take an extremely common experience among salespeople, especially junior salespeople. An inside salesperson, such as this woman pictured here, might have the task of making 50 outbound calls per day. She's trained, she has the scripts, she understands the CRM procedures, and she actually wants to be successful in sales, but she's not being successful. Why is that? Because there's an emotion in her way. She's experiencing fear about making these outbound calls, something every sales manager has encountered in one or more employees, what we call call anxiety. Well, the result of being afraid of making these calls is that she procrastinates, she avoids, she doesn't tick down her to-do lists that are popping up in the CRM system. And when she makes a call and her heart's pounding because of fear and the call goes to voicemail, she's actually relieved rather than upset. So think about that, and it's easy to imagine that somebody with that problem is going to be very ineffective. Their effectiveness might be less than half of what they're expected to accomplish. So what do we normally do? We let the person go and hire somebody else. Well, that's an expensive solution, and it might not be the best solution. What if we could resolve the fear? What if we had a mechanism, and we do, that actually cleared the fear? Not so that we're squishing it, suppressing it, or avoiding it, but we actually cleared the fear. How would that affect this woman's performance? Well, it would be dramatic, wouldn't it? So the way we do this is I would meet with this person one-on-one in a private setting, and I would ask her to focus on the fear, not suppress it, not avoid it, but actually feel it fully. And I would ask her to give it a score of intensity from 1 to 10, what we call a subjective unit of discomfort score, or a SUD score. And she might say, well, it's like a 6. My palms are sweating, my heart is pounding, and I'm feeling adrenaline in my system. Well, what we do is while she's feeling that fear, we use EFT tapping and we clear it. What we do is we ask her to repeat a simple phrase. An example might be something like, even though I'm feeling afraid to make these phone calls, I deeply and completely love and accept myself, while tapping. Now, tapping has been clinically proven to send a calming signal to the amygdala, the part of the brain that controls our fight-flight response. That calming signal is, for reasons we don't fully understand, embraced by the brain and replaces the feeling of fear that was there. Amazing. It really is that amazing. So we may do a round of tapping, which might take 3 or 4 minutes to get to all the different tapping points and saying the appropriate things. And then I will ask her, how do you feel now? What comes to mind? And sometimes the SUD score will go up because we start to get into some pay dirt, you might want to say. But most of the time it comes down. Something like a 6 might come down to a 3 after a round of tapping. Of course, it varies all over the map. And so then I would say, well, is the fear still the main feeling, or has any other feeling come up? And she might say, no, the fear's still it. So we do another round of tapping and we get it down to a 1 or a 0. That is not uncommon. But she also at some point might say, you know what, I'm feeling a little angry. And then we could do a round on the anger. Now, we don't need to know the whole story or the whole history. We just need to know what she's feeling. And we can clear these feelings by repeating as necessary. Now, imagine the transformation when she goes to make a phone call and literally does not feel the fear. She can remember that she used to have it, but now when she thinks about having had that fear, she feels silly. It's like, what was that about? Why was that ever a concern? So, of course, once those fears are gone, her productivity skyrockets, her enjoyment of her job goes up, and because she didn't need to be replaced, turnover goes down. So think about this. This is just one little example in one department of the company. But the same thing could apply to CEOs that need to go out and raise venture capital or need to fire a board member. It could go to any department manager who's afraid to confront issues with a difficult employee. There are just so many areas where this happens, and that's just the emotion of fear. A few other examples that are really common, because tapping can be used to clear just about anything. The fear of public speaking. It's the most dominant fear across adults in the United States. It's amazing. Anger in the workplace, where a simple interrogative conversation turns into a battle. Anger causes emotions to escalate. People start pointing fingers and blaming. It's very disruptive, but more than that, it's destructive to department cohesion. And then you may have somebody who's grieving the loss of a loved one or feeling sadness, or even grieving a reorganization at the company where somebody he loved or really enjoyed working with was moved out. There's also the phenomenon of shame. Shame over failing to achieve objectives. Shame over losing the deal that was almost there. So these are just a few examples of all the kinds of things that tapping can address in the workplace. So now that you understand these examples, you can see how powerful this equation is. For any given task, in any given situation, for any particular employee with all that complex sense of emotions, we could have a positive emotional coefficient, or we could have a negative emotional coefficient. And you know what happens when you multiply? That means that business success outcome will either be negative or positive. And so what we do in tapping is go right into the real issue. And we don't need to know all the complex storylines and all the interdepartmental stories and history and whatever. None of that matters. What matters is, how does each individual feel about each individual thing they're being asked to do? We often do this in the form of a workshop where I come in and train a group of people on tapping, and then I meet with them individually to go over their specific issues, but everybody learns the technique together. It's very powerful and can develop quite a bit of cohesion. I might add, it's especially valuable when you have a retreat setting, when you're trying to, pull back from the day-to-day and actually spend a little bit of time thinking about how you work together. I hope you found this discussion of the emotional coefficient to be interesting and useful. It affects everything in our personal and professional lives. It would be my pleasure to either work with you personally on issues you may be grappling with, or to work with your organization and uncover the emotional blocks that are hindering business success. Please reach out to me by giving me a call at the number provided, or send me an email and we can set up a time to talk. Thanks so much for listening again. This is Caine O'Brien, the Tapping Consultant.